All right, we're going to talk about some highway safety, vehicle extrication, some of those techniques you're going to get called to on a pretty routine basis. Let me get this slides up for you. There we go. Emergency operations as a whole. So we're talking about responding to traffic accidents. This is one of our most, one of the most common things that we encounter. So the biggest hazard we have on these scenes, though, is the oncoming traffic. Okay, so when you're on these scenes, we need to make sure that we're watching out for each other. All right, don't get tunnel vision. I know we have a lot of work to do, especially, for example, this scene here is a little messy. We've got to roll over. Do we have people entrapped? But we do need to occasionally make sure you're looking up and watching out for your peers, yourself. We can't always just assume that because police presence there that someone's not going to, accidentally come into our accident scene and injure us. So if we're one of the first arriving units, we need to establish incident command. We need to confirm the exact location. What are you seeing? Dispatch has called us to this accident scene based on what a caller has told them. So let's confirm, let's verify and give dispatch an update. We're going to have to do that anyway, right? Because if we need extra resources, we're going to need to go ahead and radio for those if we haven't done that already. We may need to block the scene. I have a video at the end of this lecture that's excellent. It's going to discuss how to set up safety zones, where you should be parking on accident scenes, and etc. So rescue trucks arriving to perform extrication should be downstream of the initial blocking vehicle. We want 1 to 1.5 to 2 lanes of blockage if we can on an accident. I know that the State Patrol, police, they're going to want to keep traffic flowing. However, we need to make sure that that's safe to do so. So when we position our ambulances at our apparatuses, whatever you're in, we're going to position them at an angle with those wheels rotated away from the incident. So if you're coming up behind an accident, you're going to be pulling to the right, probably at an angle, and make sure you also turn your wheels. That way, if a vehicle does hit the rear of your apparatus, it's going to roll the opposite. It's going to roll into the ditch area instead of straight at you. So that's why we turn the wheels rotate them away. We got to leave some space to work and some space for potential accident, right? We usually position command vehicles, ambulances downstream from the crash. So depending if you are a arriving unit later, fire's probably already got it blocked. They're going to show you to get probably ahead or get downstream from that accident. It allows for safer loading. It allows for us to get in and out of there without weaving through traffic, through other apparatus, just a safer approach. So when you're exiting out, make sure that you're watching, communicate, look for oncoming traffic. Make sure you have your high-vis safety vests on for sure. And be careful. Make sure that we're getting into the safe zone securely. Night operations has especially challenging things. We've got, blinky lights, bright lights. We want to shut our white response and our headlights off and keep the other lights on. So oncoming traffic isn't getting blinded by all of our white lights, right? If you're involved in an extrication process, which you probably will at some point in your career, we're going to need to understand what has to happen. Obviously, you're going to be working with another department, the fire and rescue, to safely cut away the vehicle from your patient. You're still going, that still is your patient. You're probably going to be going in, getting a helmet on and directing what patient needs to come out first. And you're going to be absolutely communicating with your patient. So just looking at the situation, recognizing hazards, working with your police and your fire departments to make sure that it can be as safe of a zone as possible. Make sure that vehicle is stabilized. Make sure that the battery has been disconnected. All right, we don't need airbags deploying at us. And making sure our access to the patient can be as quick and safe as possible. You're going to still do your primary assessment, rapid trauma assessment, best you can while that patient's in the vehicle. Try to manage your ABCs best you can. Doing some immobilization procedures where it's just going to be a rapid extrication. So we're going to be holding C-spine, getting a collar on, probably stabilizing them based on a mechanism of injury, and then providing additional care and transport to the appropriate facility. So depending on the severity of your patient's injuries. So how do we prepare for these? Well, we practice, okay? Training practice, right gear, right tools. Pretty sure that's not his first day hanging off with that vehicle. He's probably had some extensive training to do that. So we do tend to, on at least an annual basis, train with our fire and rescue folks and practice cutting vehicles apart. So we gain some of that experience. So it is not our forte. You know, our uniforms aren't fire safe. They're not glass safe. So we do need some specialized teams to come in and help us out. They have better equipment to cut cars apart, of course. If there's any vehicle fires, they are prepared to take care of that. Their turnout gear is very, very rugged, very sturdy versus our pants and shirts that we wear. So we're going to be working with these guys to take care of extrications. So when you come on scene, do a good scene size up. Don't get tunnel vision, just looking at the accident itself. Make sure that you're looking around. Are there any hazards we need to be mindful of? Do we need additional resources? Is there fuel leaking? How many cars do we have involved? How many patients do we have? Do we need to triage? Do we need to call helicopter support? And how trapped are our patients? Can we get to them? Are we going to need additional rescue crews? You should make sure that you're in protective clothing, at least that safety vest and a helmet if you're going into a vehicle. Sometimes the fire department will give you one of their turnout coats to wrap around you while they're cutting the car away. Using safety flares, traffic cones to slow that traffic, channel it down. Like I said, the video at the end of this chapter will go over those things on how to set up cones properly. So there's our protective gear, at least a high vis vest. There's an example of a rescue helmet. And you should be having that high vis on, that high vis vest, anytime you're working on a street, highway, whenever there's traffic. Okay, so not just your high speed. You should be anytime you're in a street or anything that has traffic flowing, you should definitely be wearing that high vis vest. And most of your protocols are going to call for that. So during an extrication, an actual extrication, yes, you are going to be jumping right on in. Look at this paramedic EMS guy right there. He's right in the thick of it. And you're going to have increased exposure to flame, glass, fluids, sharp objects. So make sure you're wearing your proper EMS gear. You might need to put, like I said, turnout coat on, helmet, and definitely eye protection. Things are, going to be cutting and glass is going to be breaking. So you want to protect yourself. Then protect your patient. So a rescue blanket draped around them, a wool blanket, whatever your teams carry. Have your boards ready to go. Make sure that your helmet, safety goggles, everything's on. And if they need to put safety glasses on them, absolutely. Provide emotional support for sure. If you want, the first time you're involved in one of these practice extrications or live, I guess, it's pretty traumatic. There's glass breaking, there's metal snapping. It can really mess with your nerves. So make sure that you're being very supportive with your patient and talking to them and telling them that they can trust what's going on and they need to stay calm, and you're right there with them, because it is quite loud. And especially if you cover them with a blanket, they're not able to see what's going on. So you're going to need to talk them through that. So managing traffic, whether you're the managing traffic unit or you're assisting, position those flares, cones every 10 feet and kind of channel the vehicles and doing the unblocked lane. If it is a 2-lane road and you've got to block the highway, then you're going to have to use flares and cones in both directions. Do not use flares as your traffic wand. There's no need to do that. It's going to confuse your traffic. Airbags, all right, they are good. They dissipate upon impact to protect your occupants of the vehicle. However, they can cause significant injury, so be aware of that. I've had a broken nose. I've had dislocated collars, shoulders from the impact that those airbags make. They do create smoke in the vehicle, so cornstarch, talcum powder. So your patient is actually inhaling that. So it can cause some respiratory compromise or some irritability of the lungs. So be prepared to treat that. You should not be getting into a car that the fire department has not disengaged the battery. We don't need EMS providers killed or severely hurt by having an airbag deployed when you're in there and you were not prepared for it while you were treating a patient. Okay, so if the fire department has not been called in a vehicle accident, you really need to get them out there and get that battery disengaged. Energy absorbing bumpers, the bumper shock absorber systems compressed. Don't stand right directly in front of those bumpers. They can fire off. So approach at a 45-degree angle, not straight head on. All right, so just be aware that got some triggers in these vehicles. We've got airbags, we've got energy absorbing bumpers, so just be mindful of that. We don't need to get hurt on an accident scene that we've already got hurt people at. So your spectators, yep, they may interfere with rescue and emergency care. If policies permit, you can ask bystanders to keep spectators away or try to get police presence there. We can't do a good job if we've got people overlooking and impeding our care. It puts you in an unsafe position. We don't want to be doing that. We don't want the rubberneckers. That's what we kind of call them when they sit and stare at an accident and then they cause a secondary accident. So we want to keep traffic moving as efficiently as we can, but we don't want to compromise our safety while we're doing that. So electrical hazards, high voltage lines. This particular picture, we've got a vehicle that has hit a power pole. You have to assume that that line is energized. We have no way to know for sure if that is. We are going to have to, the best thing we can do, even though we've got injured patients there, is we're going to need to section off that scene and keep other vehicles and bystanders out of there until the lineman can be called to get that de-energized and have it verified that it is. Okay, we don't need to be getting electrocuted trying to save someone else. So very large safety zone. As you can see, this is a big mess. We've got to pull right through the car. I understand we want to save the patients, but we really need to have the professionals there to take care of that. If a car hits that pad mounted transformer, you see that transformer is right next to that car, must have rolled and then hit it. Once again, we're going to assume that this is energized until proven otherwise, and that is not our role. We need to make sure the power company is called and it's de-energized properly before we can do any rescue. Okay, keep yourself safe. Vehicle fires, if we've got a small fire, a 15, 20-pound ABC class dry extinguisher should extinguish it. Do not open that hood yourself. That fire could shoot right out at you. If you've not been properly trained to do that or not part of a fire rescue team, do not do that. As you can see, he's actually leaving the hood partially closed and trying to extinguish that fire without opening that. It's going to oxygenate and it's going to cause that fire to become bigger and shoot out at you. So do not do that. The fire in the passenger compartment, once again, we should be having fire with us, some specialized team or fire department with us, because when we do apply those fire extinguishers, once again, we're going to have some respiratory compromise. So I understand we don't want people to burn, but at the same time, we really need to make sure we have fire with us. Same thing, fire under the vehicle, you're going to sweep it. And all of that would require additional training. So just be aware you can use that ABC extinguisher. but you're going to use it sparingly until the professionals get there. Big semi truck fires, yes, ABC extinguisher, but to the extent that we're going to be helpful. So take a look at this. Obviously, our small portable extinguisher is never going to put that out. We need to stay away from this area. We really do. Flames can set, fuel tanks, they can explode. So or tires can explode. It is not a safe scene. We need to have fire come in, and we need to establish and deem that scene safe before we do any patient care. Okay, disabling the vehicle's electrical system. Once again, if you haven't been trained in this, you probably should not be messing with it. Electric cars, any electrical systems, the fire department knows how to disengage the cables. A lot of cars have electrically powered door locks, windows. Yes, they do. But if you have not been trained in that and know how to disconnect the negative cable from the battery to disable it, you shouldn't be doing this. Okay. A more safe approach is probably to bust a window to get them out, believe it or not. So if you're not trained in that, until you are, you're going to have some alternative methods to get those folks out of the car. So stabilizing the vehicles, if you can reach in safely without putting your head right in the window because of possible airbag deployment, shut the car off. All right, get the car shut off. The fire department's going to come out and step chock 3 sides of the car so it can't move anywhere before we do any rescue. You may see them stabilizing with ropes, cribbing, stabilizing bars. All right, we're not just going to jump on the top of that car and try to get it back on its wheels again. That is not safe. That's not within our realm of expertise. When you're trying to get someone out of a vehicle, they roll over, they're in a ditch, whatever. Try before you pry. Okay. Can the window be open? Can the door be unlocked? Is the door already unlocked? So before you exhibit all kinds of energy trying to cut doors out and breaking windows and all of that, try the door handle. All right. Can they roll the window down? Can we get them out that way? So if we do have to break a window, try to break the window as far away from the passengers that you can. It's not always possible, but you're going to try to do that as often as you can and make sure if they are responsive, make sure you're explaining to them that you're going to be breaking a window and that they need to shield as best they can while you do that so you can get them out. Okay. So the last thing we've got with this chapter is a video from the Minnesota State Patrol and the Minnesota First Responders. It's an excellent video on how to set up accident scenes and what we should be looking for and how much of a risk it really is with us being out there.
It was a Sunday afternoon.
I was working a day shift. It was snowing, but not terribly hard.
Shortly before 7 a.m., I responded to a 2-vehicle crash.
It was a call for a car that was on fire on I-35.
I think I was on the job for maybe about 6 months at the time. I had stopped for a semi-truck that was hauling a big 4-wheel drive tractor.
My partner and I were escorting the patient to a waiting ambulance when I heard a noise, and all 3 of us were struck from behind.
Waiting for a tow truck to respond, and as I sat there, I noticed in my rearview mirror that there was a crash that had happened behind me. I waited for an opening in traffic. I backed up on I-35 and got behind the 2 vehicles that were involved in the crash. Got out of my squad and just walked up there like I did hundreds of other times, asked if everybody was okay, and asked what had happened. Within seconds of standing and talking to these 2 drivers, the younger of the 2 gentlemen said, "Look out."
10-4, the other guy, he's got a pretty good head injury, and I can't really get up.
With the advent of all the electronic devices, we're seeing people that are multitasking when they're driving and not having 100% concentration.
My partner was up at righting the crash and the ambulance was on scene. There were injuries. I had rolled up on the crash, realized that we weren't in a very optimal place to be. It was at the top of the hill crest. It was just slightly around a curve. So I went to the shoulder to back up into the straightaway so that people could see where I was at and that I was blocking the lane for at least half mile. I watched traffic in my mirror for a couple of minutes to make sure that people were able to see me, and I saw that, way back, clear down by the end or the bottom of the bridge of Dowling, they were moving over, so I knew people were able to see me where I was at. And then I started typing a message to the person that was writing the crash, and that's when all of a sudden I got hit.
Unfortunately, a lot of drivers tend to just look at their hood ornament as they're driving down the road, and they may not be aware of how fast it is.
We get a page for a car fire on the interstate. And so I got up, got dressed, and ran out the door, told my wife, I love you, I'll see you later, and got up to the hall. We loaded up in our truck like usual and got out there. We got the car fire put out. It was when I was unhooking the hose from the driver's side of the truck that a car lost control and pinned me up against the truck.
You gotta expect the unexpected, and anything can happen again at any moment. Again, don't take anything for granted.
We pulled up on the freeway behind the scene and just tried to watch traffic and have some lights on so other people knew that there was something coming up. We discussed it and told him to go up there and just make sure things were done right. Shortly after that, there was a rather loud crash. We had a Caprice got rear-ended by a Ford F-150, so he got pushed into the cars that we had. Kim got stopped by the tires, and his feet got stuck there, and he was flung back and flung forward, and all that momentum just burst his aorta, and that was how that one ended.
You're out in this unsafe location, or you're out on the side of the freeway longer than necessary. You have to balance between constantly watching and also getting done what needs to be done.
One of my daughters was sitting out on the rocks crying. And so he goes up to her and he goes, "Avery, what's wrong?" And she's like, "I just want my dad home from the hospital." And it's something like that that really makes you realize the effect it has on your family.
I drive past that spot every day, and you think, your life changed there.
Vehicles from a couple of thousand pounds all the way up to tens of thousands of pounds, 60, 70, 75 miles an hour. That's a very permanent end to your life if you're struck directly by them.
You're there because somebody is having a bad day, something bad happened. Your goal is to try to make that thing better, not make it worse.
It's our job not only to get responders to where they need to go, but to keep them safe. We do a lot of what I call investigative work too. While officers en route, we check who, what, when, where, and why. The first thing we need to verify is where a person is. We can't help anyone unless we know where the incident is taking place. And then we have a standard set of questions. Who's involved? What's going on?
We want everybody to go home at the end of the night. So whatever you have to do to get there, you have to do. Position your car the right way on a traffic stop.
When you're on scene, it's very important that if you see something that's not right, you make it right. If you neglect anything that's not right, it leads to someone getting injured.
I know our first drivers, one of their priorities is trying to keep the road moving, try to keep the lanes clear and try to keep the roadway flowing as much as possible.
And that's that quick clearance that we talk about. You know what, if we can move things or you know, if this thing was in fact just a stall, an overheat, whatever the case might be, if you can move an incident off the roadway, then do it. By moving an incident completely off the roadway, you're not distracting the motoring public by sitting on the shoulder with lights on.
The state economy, your local economy, depends on reliable transportation. You need to keep traffic moving as much as it's practical to do so, as much as you can, balancing the safety of your scene. In some cases, it's not always going to be possible to do it, but when you can, try to keep traffic moving if it's possible. And if you need to close the road, try to get the road back open again as soon as it's practical to do it.
If there's something that changes at the scene regarding the flow of traffic, everybody that's on scene has to be aware of that. You can't open a lane of traffic to get additional traffic moving and not notify everybody that's working on the scene. A responder that's focused on the task at hand may step back into traffic because they're not paying attention to the traffic.
And emergency responders do get complacent. They get a tunnel vision, they're there to do a job. You've got to take off those tunnel vision glasses and realize there's a much bigger picture out there because there's always traffic coming through your scene and you have to be aware of that.
It's not just the motoring public we have to worry about. Complacency will kill us. It will kill you, it can kill your partners, so avoid it.
Rural areas, it's more the unexpectedness of it because people aren't expecting stop traffic. And the roads may be a two-lane highway and you have curves and you have hills and the last thing you're expecting is to come over a hill and have stop traffic. Think about what it is that's around you. Think about how the traffic is reacting to you as they come up. How far back can they see you from? Don't just tunnel in on the first crash, at the thing that you're there for. Think about what's going in, what's happening around you.
Responders have a very limited opportunity to train together. The opportunity to debrief after a very traumatic scene or a very large scene can assist in future training.
The variable is still going to be the traffic coming at you. They have no awareness of what's going on. They have no, they are just driving wherever they're driving. They're going to work, they're going to school. They have no expectation that something unusual is about to happen. So you need to be the one to always be thinking about what's going to happen, about what the potentials are.
Responders are not exempt. We have to remember that. When responding to any call, responders are not exempt from the law. They have to drive with a due regard for the safety of people using the streets.
You need to establish procedures on traveling to the scene because the traffic laws still prevail. Even though you have lights and siren, yes, you can proceed cautiously through an intersection or through a red light, but there's always a potential that somebody didn't catch that. Fire service has a new everyone goes home program, stop at stop signs, stop at red lights, and there are even some law enforcement agencies and some EMS agencies that I've seen that have adopted those policies as well. Communication is a very important piece, and the communication needs to start before incidents happen. Even if you've butted heads with other agencies in the past, you got to push the egos aside. You got to push, this is the way we've always done it, aside. You've got to push, this is how our agency does it. Everybody's got to learn to work together. We talk about unified command in the instance where nobody is specifically in charge. Everybody's in charge of their own specific duties at the time, but through that coordination, cooperation, and communication, you have this unified command process where everybody has a piece of puzzle, everybody works together in a coordinated fashion to communicate with each other and let them know what the other is doing so you can work together and do it more efficiently and do it more effectively. When it comes to parking vehicles, one of the most important things that really needs to be stressed is the topography. Is there a curve? Is the incident right after a curve? Is the incident right beyond a hill? And as a result, if you have that, The traveling public, once they go around that curve, they don't know something's going on unless you're telling them something's going on.
If it's on a curve, you might park it just a little bit different. On a hill, you might park it back a little bit farther just so that people coming over the hill can see.
They need to take in their surroundings to see what's going on, the lay of the road, the curves, the hills, especially today, the traffic conditions, the road conditions, where it helps to really know your area.
Anytime you're in the vehicle, whether responding to a crash or just sitting in the vehicle at a scene, it's extremely important to put your seatbelt on. That seatbelt is going to hold you in that seat. If that vehicle gets struck, you're going to be moving around inside that vehicle along with all the other objects in the vehicle.
Well, some of the things that people get complacent about are, cones and road flares. Safety vests are a big one.
You're given safety protective equipment for a reason. Wear it. If it's appropriate, it needs to be on.
The only variable that you actually can control is whether you're taking advantage of all of the safety equipment and the best practices that you have to protect yourself. And that means wearing a vest, it means how you park, it means advanced warning, it means taking advantage of everything you can to try to shift the odds in your favor.
You've got to get into the habit of wearing your personal protective equipment, and everybody's got the procedures down on what safety equipment to use each and every time. It's got to be, no matter how big a call, no matter how small of a call, everybody's got to get into the good habits. Once a call is dispatched, every emergency responder is going to be thinking of different things on the way there. They're going to be listening to the information, taking that in. Do they have one victim, two victims? Is it potentially blocking? Weather conditions, the topography, whether it's a curve, whether it's a hill. Is it on a freeway? Is it rush hour?
Can you move it to a safer location? Can you move it to a shoulder? Can you move it off the highway? And that's going to be a better outcome for everyone. You can remove the threat of traffic by moving the incident itself.
After arrival, it's important to establish control of your scene, making sure traffic is directed safely around the scene.
One of the analogies I like to use about traffic is that it's like flowing water. It can be fast, it can be slow, it can be a raging river or a small stream. One of the main things is it's always going to keep coming. So if you just block it, if you just dam it, it's going to go places that you may not want it to go. If you can think about it when you respond, that not only do I have to deal with this incident that I'm at, that I also need to think about what that flow of traffic is behind me, and set up in a way that minimizes the chances of additional problems happening.
The first vehicle on scene may need to establish an initial block.
Depending on where the accident is, if it's in the lane, we'll take that lane, particular lane, and we'll turn on all the lights. So basically we become that barrier between the crash and then the traveling public.
If you're the first one on scene, put your emergency vehicle between the incoming traffic and where you're going to be on foot. The problem with most emergency lights is that it's all about saying, here I am, here I am, here I am, but it doesn't give any instruction.
You want to taper people off into a different direction. You're using cones, you're using flares to establish that taper, where it's spread out, just almost like follow the yellow brick road. This is the direction that we want you to go.
In order to set up an effective taper, use traffic cones or flares. Space them apart at approximately 10 pace intervals, directing traffic away from and around the scene.
Remember that cones and flares are not invisible force fields. They're a way to communicate with traffic, a way to tell them to move over and judge their rate of closure as they're coming in.
A lot of the traveling public believes that when you tell them to slow down means going from 60 to 58. We don't want them to go that fast. We want them to get down in the 20s and 30s when they pass through our scene.
Advanced warning is something to give the incoming traffic that first clue, hey, something's about to happen, so that they start paying attention. It can be the signs, it can be as simple as having a squad, somebody with flashing lights on the shoulder before the scene. So from a traffic control perspective, you want to give the incoming traffic enough time and space that they can react safely. 5, 10, 15 seconds before the traffic hits the scene. It's always on the shoulder. Advance warning needs to be on the shoulder. It's not on the lane.
Every responder, if they're looking for a crash and it's just over the peak of a hill or just beyond a curve, you need to make sure that you get some advance warning and some signage before that curve, before that hill ASAP. You're looking for it and you had to slam on your brakes. The traveling public doesn't have any idea that there's something beyond that hill, there's something beyond that curve. Advance warning is extremely important, and that's going to be the last vehicle leaving the scene, because you don't want to pull out the advance warning before the incident's completed. Otherwise, people don't know that something's going on up ahead.
First responders can be flaggers. Flagging can be an effective tool on two-lane roadways, and when one side of the road is blocked and the only option is to allow traffic to come through in groups, you have a flagger at each end of the incident. The first flagger stops all of the traffic, while the second flagger at the other end allows the traffic to pass through. Both of the flaggers need to be in communication with each other. Make sure you still have advanced warning set up ahead of time too. Remember that flagger is going to be in one of the most vulnerable spots. Use the resources that you have. In the metro, we have a lot of options. We have the overhead signboards, we have the first trucks. Greater Minnesota, you're not going to have access to that. Carry the cones, carry the flares. How you use these tools can be very effective. So the first one on scene, number one, park behind the incident. Put something between yourself and the incoming traffic. Be sure you call in to your dispatch and let them know, and that you let your fellow responders know exactly where it is that you are and what the impact is. If you're blocking a lane, if you're not, if you're on the shoulder, make sure everybody's on the same page as far as where it is. Let your other responders know if you want them to park somewhere. Give them instructions on where it is that you want them to go. Next step, setting up the taper as a way to direct traffic where you want them to be. And then marking out the work area. Try to make it as clear as possible so the traffic knows where to go. Set up your advance warning to give them a clue something's about to happen. And then adjust, monitor and adjust as necessary. So the components, so the basic concepts, so advanced warning, this is the first clue to traffic that something is about to happen. Transition area, this is where you're moving people from where they want to be to where you want them to be. Buffer space is an open area between your cones and your actual equipment. This is an area so that if somebody does come into your scene and isn't paying attention and locks up their brakes, all they're doing is hitting cones. Shadow vehicle, something big and heavy enough to stop a high-speed vehicle from coming into the scene. More space after that, because if a fire truck gets hit by a semi, it's going to move. So you need to have a little bit more space in there, so if it does move, it's not hitting anybody. And then you've got your work area where the actual crash is. This is where the pedestrians are. And then staging area, it could be the ambulance, could be tow trucks, farther enough downstream.
All responders have to communicate, coordinate, cooperate when they're on scenes. Dispatchers play a very important piece of communication. First, they let us know what information they have. They continue to update that information. We could probably all do a better job of giving more information to the dispatchers. Dispatchers are typically trained to repeat what they hear. So maybe the incoming agency didn't hear the chief on scene provide some information about what they had. The dispatcher plays an important role there because they can then repeat that information.
If there's something that changes at the scene, face-to-face communication is extremely important. Because traffic is like flowing water, it's important to remember that when you are going to clear a scene, it's much like a faucet. You want to open that faucet slowly. You can't open a lane of traffic to get additional traffic moving and not notify everybody that's working on the scene.
Emergency responders, when they show up on scene, they need to do what they need to do to keep themselves safe, to keep other responders safe, and also keep the people that they're there to help safe. It doesn't matter what discipline it is, what agency it is, you want everybody to have a round-trip ticket.
Be prepared for anything to happen. The Lowry Hill Tunnel is an area in the metro that is notorious for anything and everything that happens. I was traveling eastbound Interstate 94 coming through the tunnel and heard a loud, what sounded like an explosion, and suddenly saw a semi coming at my squad car on its side, and behind the semi was a wave of milk. It was a tanker truck that had rolled over. First responders are often faced with unpredictable situations. The training that first responders go through provides them with the tools to respond safely and effectively. Bridge decks are hazards for everyone that responds. There's no avenue of escape on a bridge deck.
Crash on the river bridge. Imagine you were standing just in front of this and you look up and you see a car coming at you. What are your choices? Probably jump over the wall. And if this crash, instead of being in the left lane, this crash was in the right lane, would jumping over the wall be a good idea? You have to be aware of the entire environment. You have to be aware of the things that are going on around you.
It's very important to everybody to park on the same side.
You're not competing with different views from the traffic. They're not having to scan back and forth to keep track of everything.
Most of the concepts are the same between Minnesota rural areas versus metro areas, but there might be some procedural differences. In the rural areas, firefighters may respond directly to the scene in their personal vehicles.
If you're responding in personal vehicles, best advice would be to park past the scene and as far off to the shoulder as you can.
We live in Minnesota, and we have ice, we have snow, we have rain.
Road conditions cause the first crash, can cause another one. If the first guy got there, so can somebody else.
When it comes to communication, that dispatcher becomes a very critical piece in that information for updates. Are the roads icy? Are there some power lines nearby?
As a dispatcher, I think as far as making sure that the responders are safe, we make sure that there aren't any hazmat chemicals or anything of that nature.
The cable barriers are very effective from preventing crossover crashes. However, they are under high tension, so it's important to get some information from MnDOT if you have cable barriers in your area. You have to be very aware of making sure you don't have too many lights, depending on where your incident is, because you might create a gawker scene.
Especially at night, you need to have enough emergency lighting so that people can see you from a distance. But at a certain point, it just becomes overwhelming. It's not just about having a ton of blinky lights, it's about giving some sort of instruction to people.
The roadway is extremely dangerous anytime there's traffic, anytime there's potential for traffic to come through, even in a parking lot. You can't predict what people are going to do. You can't control what other people are going to do. You can control your actions. You can do as much as you can to keep yourself safe, but it just takes that one instance and you won't be able to ever take it back.
Going back early in my career, standing there thinking that traffic was seeing me, and you hear the tires screeching and that car is out of control because they were looking at something else and didn't notice you until it was almost too late.
It's not if you're going to get hit, it's when you're going to get hit.
You know, it goes to show that no matter how safe you have a scene set up, if you're doing everything right, something can go wrong.
Work with your other partners in the public safety arena, your EMS, your fire, and your law enforcement. Collaborate and work together.
To make sure that everybody does go home at the end of the day. And it doesn't matter whether they're firefighters on my department, firefighters on somebody else's department, whether it's law enforcement or EMS or tow operators.
Biggest purpose out there is to get everybody home, and most of all, the patients that we're there for. Don't forget about each other when this kind of stuff happens. You really need to heal together.
Just about every emergency responder out there wants to make sure that everybody goes home, not just the responders, but also the traveling public.
Keep your eyes open. Remember, you need to come home. Bring everybody home that goes out.
Okay, So everybody goes home, guys. Everybody goes home. Okay. Very good video on blocking, making sure that you keep everyone safe and everybody comes home to their loved ones. So with that, that will end our discussion on chapter 40.